Today's guest is Chris Cosgriff, police captain and founder of the Officer Down Memorial page. At just 19, as a college freshman, Chris launched ODMP from his dorm room. Nearly 3 decades later, it's become the nation's leading digital memorial honoring fallen officers and keeping their stories alive. In this episode, you'll hear how a single idea grew into a movement, the impact it's had on families and communities, and how Chris continues to serve on the front lines of law enforcement today. Here's the full story of Chris and the Officers Down Memorial page.
19-year-old Chris Cosgriff, college student at James Mason, freshman. Most kids in his position would be running away from the police or avoiding the police or complaining about the police or protesting the damn police. And here's Chris, 19-year-old Chris, taking a whole different route. That really impressed me. That sent a message because that was so different than what most college kids that I knew, including my own kids, were doing at 19 years of age. So it might be interesting to start there at the beginning. This was back in 96, I believe.
Yep.
At James Mason University.
James Madison,
not Mason. Madison, yeah. And I got my Madisons and Masons. But 1996, tell our audience what you did that, by the way, folks, is still alive and well and prospering today. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. January 1996, I was a freshman, James Madison University in Virginia, and I just finishing up a time when I was in high school, just getting interested in technology, the internet. Back in the day, that was dial-up AOL and all that. And I entered school in a technology program. It was a brand new degree program called Integrated Science and Technology, which sort of was like a hybrid between computer science and business. Right, that's the best way to describe it. It's evolved since then, but at the time, that's sort of what it was. And so, freshman year, I started learning how to make web pages, learning HTML and just the basics. And I was backing it up a little bit in high school. I had been an explorer for the Fairfax City Police Department in Northern Virginia. It's a small department at the time. It was probably 60 officers or so. And, I told the explorer advisors, my dream in life is to become a cop. And, I'm going to be a cop here in Fairfax City. And I don't know what I'm going to do until I'm 21, when I can't, when I can go to the academy. And my advisors, I don't, whatever their motive, they're like, no, don't become a cop, go to college and learn technology and get a degree and make a lot more money.
There you go.
I'm like, I'll show them.
All about the money, right?
It's like, I'll show them, ha, ha, ha. And so fast forward back to January 96, I've learned a little bit of HTML, learning how to do web pages. And this was, I think, just a year earlier. Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Around 94, 95 was the dedication of the memorial. And when I was
1991.
So when I was an explorer, I had actually participated in that dedication and the walk from the Capitol to the memorial. And I got one of those little lights that I still have actually in my office here. I have displayed that flashlight from the memorial dedication. And so that, as an explorer, touched a little bit about, fallen officers and stuff, but it wasn't really on my mind until January of 96. And so I still get a little emotional talking about it, but that's sort of, it's made a big impact on my life ever since. And that was when there was a newspaper article in the Washington Post about Terrence Johnson, who murdered Officer Albert Claggett and Officer James Swart in Prince George's County, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Those murders happened in 1978, but he was just being released from prison.
Wow.
And the Washington Post did this big expose on him, and I just didn't think it was right. And so my connection to law enforcement, my connection to knowing that the memorial was had just been dedicated a few years earlier. I was like, well, what can I do? I'm just a college kid. I know HTML. There was no website for the memorial. And so I just was like, well, I can create a memorial for these officers on the internet. All right. Around that same time, just within a few days of this article, Officer Lori Thaverd in Philadelphia was murdered responding to a bank robbery. She got in the Washington Post like 3 sentences where Terrence Johnson gets this whole Metro section front page spread. And I was like, that's not right. So I sat down and she was the first memorial created. And within a few days, Bryant Penny in Fort Lauderdale, Florida was murdered. He was one of the second or third memorial created. His twin brother, just a few days after that, emails me saying, hey, thank you for this memorial. It really means a lot. And that's when it hit me how important this was. And so from that day forward, I vowed, like, I will always be involved. I'll always do this. And it just sort of really caught momentum after that. And it's, at one point I would argue was the most visited law enforcement website in the world for a number of years. That's not
Chris, let's chime in. And that website that you're talking about is the ODMP, the Officer Down Memorial page.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
And you are the founder of the Officer Down Memorial page, of which today is one of the most prominent sites to go and research and find and honor officers that have fallen in the line of duty. And you are that man that created that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you're right. It is the Officer Down Memorial page. And, I refer to it, and I think most people refer to it as ODMP. And, these days it gets about 4 or 5 million visitors a year. We have the website, the mobile app, email notifications, plus a series of events that help support the organization and some of the other initiatives that ODMP supports as well. So this upcoming January will be the 30-year anniversary. Looking back over these 30 years has been quite a ride. I stepped down last September as the executive director after 29 years. And I'm still on the board of directors and I'm still involved, but the day-to-day operations, it was like giving up a child, but I did step back. And
why did you do that, Chris? Why did you do that?
About 12 years ago or 13 years ago, I decided, after I graduated college, I ended up not being a cop. I took the advisor's advice and I went into the IT field, but I maintained my work with ODMP on the side essentially as a hobby on the side, and got older and older. And then I was in my mid 30s and I thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So I applied to one department, and that was not the Fairfax City Police Department. It was the Fairfax County Police Department. I got hired, and at 35 years old, went through the academy, and that was in 2013. Last year, I was promoted to captain, and with the increased responsibility and expectations here, I just, after 29 years, could no longer balance a full-time job at work and a full-time job with ODMP, and so it was time to hand over the reins, and that's why I'm no longer the executive director, but I am still involved.
The great.
So Craig, before you jump in, I want to ask one more question and let Craig take it from here, because this kind of goes into what you just said about, you applied and you got hired. What were the dynamics at that point in time? So you're 35 years old. Everybody probably knows about the ODMP website. They know of you and about you. So how was that going into the job? The interaction with folks there. How was that a real positive? Was it, something that was different?
Yeah, I mean, the people in law enforcement in the agencies knew, I would argue I was treated no differently than any other applicant and any other recruit. The hiring process took the same 6 to 9 months to a year as anyone else applying. My academy classmates didn't know for the first few days about it. However, at one point, because our academy, like most academies throughout the country, use ODMP as a teaching tool.
Right.
So every single day in our academy class, if there was a line of duty death, one of the recruits would have to come up and write it on the board and read the memorial. And I know, different academies do different things, but it would be rare for an academy not to somehow incorporate information from ODMP into their curriculum.
Interesting.
And so it was very, very soon after we started where, the sergeant in charge of the academy, there was a line of duty death. So he asked the class as a whole, does anyone know about Officer Down Memorial Page? Of course, I'm the only one who raised my hand. And he, it put me on the spot to explain what it was. And then he asked me, he knew who I was. He asked me, how do you know about it? And I had to go into that whole thing. So he was just putting me on the spot. But,
Right.
But again, throughout the rest of the academy, I was the third oldest person in the class of about 50 or 60 people. But I was treated no differently. Passed, I had to meet the same requirements as everyone else, and I held my head high, and I was honored actually in my graduation. Craig Floyd here was the guest speaker, which was awesome. And he and I had a relationship for many, many years through his work with the National Memorial and my work with ODMP. And, we've become friends, and it was wonderful to see him there and have him be the guest speaker, which was coincidence. I had no idea until, because they don't tell us anything about the graduation.
You guys set that up. That was a setup, right? Hey, before we go further, Chris, a great story here, but I'm Craig. I know you have a lot of questions, but let me just remind everybody, this podcast, Heroes Behind the Badge, is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge, the leading voice of the American people in support of the men and women of law enforcement. It's citizensbehindthebadge.org, or some people say .org. If you like what Chris is talking about today, if you like this podcast, will you do us a favor? Hit subscribe, hit like, hit follow, okay? That way, when we release new episodes, you will be on the inside. You'll get first notice of a new episode. And we release new episodes on a regular basis, okay? Citizensbehindthebadge.org. Craig Floyd, our founder, the chairman emeritus of the National Law Enforcement Memorial. I don't have to introduce him to you, Chris. And I think Craig has got some great questions. You guys have known each other for years, and I can't wait to hear the conversation you two have. Craig, take it away.
Well, this is a real honor because Chris and I have lost touch over the last few years. I've left the Memorial Fund, and he's busy protecting me and my family. I live in Fairfax County, Virginia, so Chris is my protector, along with, 1,200 or so other officers at Fairfax County. So I'm very privileged to have one of my protectors with us today. I want to do a couple things. One, I want to go back to the incident that you alluded to that kind of inspired you to create ODMP, and that was the murder of Albert Claggett and Brian Swart from Prince George's County. I don't know if we got into enough of the details, but I wanted our audience to know these are two Prince George's County police officers here in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. It occurred in 1978, the incident where they were both murdered by Terrence Johnson. At the time, he was 15 years old. He and his brother were arrested that day for rifling through the coin machines at a laundromat. A fairly minor crime, you would think, right? They take him into the station. They fingerprint him, and as they're fingerprinting him, Albert Claggett is in a struggle with Terrence Johnson. Johnson grabs his gun, shoots and kills Albert Claggett. And Brian Swart, who hears the commotion and the struggle, tries to come to the rescue, and he is also shot and killed by this 15-year-old theft suspect. He goes to trial. He's convicted of manslaughter for Claggett's murder and he was not guilty by reason of insanity for murdering Brian Schwartz. So a lot of controversy, obviously, behind that incident and the murder and the subsequent conviction. He was sentenced to 25 years in jail, but was released early in 1995. And 2 years later, obviously, there was a lot of controversy around his early release. The police community was in an uproar, as was the community. And 2 years after his release, he and his brother, once again, were caught robbing a bank. And as police closed in, Taron Johnson, the murderer, the cop killer, died by suicide. So that's the story. It's rather very troubling, of course. But this is the incident that inspired the Officer Down Memorial page and Chris Cosgriff to do what he did as a college student. I couldn't be prouder of anyone for doing what he did to honor our fallen heroes in law enforcement. And I should point out that over the years, Chris and I have worked very closely together, me with the Memorial Fund and Chris with ODMP. And we had, I think, Chris, and you can comment on this, a very collaborative type of relationship. He would visit our office often, and his volunteer leaders with ODMP would scour the libraries and internet and anything they could find to find older deaths, line of duty deaths in law enforcement that had not been found. And Chris, tell our audience about the work you did in finding these older deaths. The Memorial Fund was pretty good at it, but you gave quite a bit of boost to our efforts in uncovering these older historical deaths.
Sure. Yeah. So, history has always been interesting to me. And when we're talking about memorializing officers, when I started ODMP in 96, it was easy, relatively easy, of course, to learn of modern day deaths. And, you would think, these days, everything is instant on social media. Everyone knows about almost every single death. In 96, that wasn't the case. So even modern day deaths, sometimes you didn't hear about it until a year later. But I don't know, it's probably closer to 1997, probably a year or two into my work with ODMP, where I started going backwards in time. And that initially was a result of two things. One is that I knew that the memorial had honored historic officers, and we wanted to be able to tell those stories as well. But also, we started, as ODMP got a following, we would hear from survivors of fallen officers from a few years ago, or from 50 years ago, or something even further, and saying, "Hey, my grandfather was killed in the line of duty," or this officer in my town was killed in the line of duty in 1800s. Can you honor them as well? And so it took a little effort. One of my college roommates was a computer science major who was an absolute genius when it came to databases and coding and stuff. His name is Mike Schutz. That's important because when we incorporated ODMP as a nonprofit, he was one of our first board members also. And so fast forward a few years, he became my brother-in-law. So it's, keep it in the family, I guess. But so we started developing the first database, and we started going back in time. And so then I had to decide, okay, well, we want, all these visitors are submitting these officers. I had the master name list of fallen officers from the National Memorial, and I would see that there were officers missing. We were getting names of officers who the National Memorial didn't know about. And to me, that was perplexing. I was like, well, they must know everything, right, at this time. But very quickly, we learned that there were countless officers who'd forgotten through time. And that's not through negligence. It's not through any reason other than it wasn't a priority to memorialize officers then the same way it is now. So I would start going to my local library and looking at microfilm from older newspapers, and we would get it through interlibrary loan. I would get a microfilm from California or something through interlibrary loan, and I would start researching an officer, and inevitably there might be another article about another officer in that same paper. And so Over the last 30 years, I've never kept track of the number of officers I've discovered, because to me, once I discover them or and honor them on the website, I move on to the next one. But I would have to estimate it's probably somewhere in the 2,000 to 3,000 officer range that I have personally discovered killed in the line of duty. The earliest one was actually just about 2 years ago. I'm still doing research. He died in 1813, and he was a customs officer up in Connecticut or Rhode Island. So it's still one of those things I enjoy doing when I have the little bit of free time I do have. It's a lot easier now with all the online resources. So many newspapers are digitized, and so many other people are out there doing research and submitting maybe like one little clue, and then our team of researchers and myself can go out and really dig into it and get all of the records that are necessary to confirm it as a line of duty death.
It's amazing. And Chris, I'd be interested if you feel the same way, but I know when we dedicated the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, there were 12,561 names. Today, there's over 24,000. And about, I'd say, half of the new additions since we dedicated the memorial in 1991 were these older deaths that you're referring to. Deaths that had not been discovered when we dedicated the National Memorial. In fact, that was one of our challenges, that we started from scratch, more or less, in terms of trying to identify fallen officers so we could put their names on the National Memorial. And the only source we had was the FBI. They had kept track of law enforcement fatalities dating back to 1961. And so we were on our own in terms of finding any deaths prior to 1961, and even deaths they had forgotten about since 1961. And you did the same thing. You and the Memorial Fund, we together did a lot of research, and we had a lot of volunteers helping us. I know you did too. But what a great feeling it is for me, because the tragedy, the dark part of the story is so far removed. The family members who were deeply affected when that officer died, to find an older death, a death that occurred 100, 200 years ago, 50 years ago. To me, that's one of the more satisfying parts of working at the Memorial Fund. And I'd be interested how you feel at ODMP. I mean, I know you're big on the recently fallen officers and making sure those announcements get out quickly. But how about finding these older deaths? What a great feeling that is, right?
Yeah, I share your sentiment exactly. One of the things for me is that if these officers had been remembered, they would already be on the memorial, right? So the fact that they have been forgotten through time, at one point, their towns, their cities honored them when they fell or were killed in the line of duty. But especially in rural areas, there's no ongoing memorial for them or anything. And so it's great to pull that out of history, find the story, piece together their biography, piece together the events that led to their death, and then in many cases, especially the historic ones, where maybe the person responsible for a murder went on the lam and wasn't arrested for a year or two, and following that story through the manhunt and through potentially a court disposition, and pulling all that back together and packaging it up into one memorial so people can read it and remember these people. Now that they're memorialized on ODMP and their names are engraved in the National Memorial, their names are never forgotten again. They will always be available for every law enforcement officer, for descendants who had no idea they were even related. I've done discoveries and then reached out to people through genealogy websites who had no idea that their ancestor was an officer killed in line of duty. So it's great to make these connections to bring these officers essentially back to life through history and tell those stories. And it's like for you, I share that it's extremely satisfying, and I'm humbled to be able to be part of that.
So I want to change
partnership, because just a final comment that ODMP at the outset in 1996, and for many years was the only source really for recently fallen deaths. All right, the only ones anyway that was announcing it to the public, somewhere where police officers could go to find out, if someone died in their profession recently, and maybe they wanted to attend the funeral or at least express a condolence to the department involved. While the Memorial Fund was more interested in the long-term honoring of those officers. We had a vetting process that was very involved, where we'd get all the details about an officer's death and then actually have a committee to review each case, make sure they met our criteria before the names would go on the National Memorial. And meanwhile, ODMP was putting out the early reports of those fatalities. So it was a great, I think, partnership that lasted for many, many years. And which I just, before I turn things back to Bill, the criteria that you use on ODMP to put an officer on the memorial, I think our audience would be interested in knowing who's eligible and how you go through that process.
Sure. Yeah. So our criteria, no surprise, was influenced heavily by the National Memorial criteria, as well as the Public Safety Officer Benefits Program. So it's sort of an amalgamation of that. We try to be as inclusive as possible, but at the core of it, you have to be a law enforcement officer with the power of arrest, with few exceptions, and those exceptions would be probably along the lines of corrections and detention officers who have responsibility of supervision of inmates, because many of those, those in our industry know that there's a different certification process between a fully sworn law enforcement officer of the rest and say detention or corrections officers in some areas. They have to be killed or die in the line of duty, or as a direct result of a line of duty incident. So the obvious ones would be felonious attacks on them, gunshots, stabbings, physical assaults, vehicle crashes, other types of crashes, motorcycles, airplanes, boats, accidents, right? An officer falls down a set of stairs or off of a wall or something like that. And then you get into like the ones that are honored more recently, which would be like the heart attacks or medical related things that have a nexus to their work as a law enforcement officer. And so, and Craig, you probably remember this too. And, one of the things when we started honoring heart attacks and started honoring, say like strokes or aneurysms and things along those lines, we actually got pushback from, I'll call them old timers in law enforcement, where there was a stigma where if you were not shot and killed in the line of duty, it didn't matter. It wasn't a line of duty death to certain parts of the law enforcement community. And so one of the things that I established early on at ODMP is that every line of duty death we treat exactly the same. So whether it's a gunshot, whether it's a car crash, whether it's a heart attack, whether it's a drowning, we treat every single memorial the same. They are all formatted the same type of information is on there, the same level of detail, the photographs, everything. And so we take a lot of pride in that. And the development of these memorials over time goes to honor that criteria and not really look for reasons to expand it. We have over time, but to treat every line of duty death as the same. Right? And so COVID was another example of a big shift in what is a line of duty death. Right. And so not surprisingly, and I know the National Memorial went through this too, is that when we started off honoring officers who died, that we could show definitively or presumptively died of COVID that contracted the line of duty, we had a big pushback from that. And we stuck with it. We treated them all the same. And, I think people eventually came around and realized that this was a significant issue.
So I want to jump in and just talk about Chris a little bit and go way back. So, when Chris and I were both significantly younger and we'd be there for National Police Week in Washington, D.C., and you and I are running around, going to all the events and doing things. But you and Craig had a kind of parallel synergy at that point because both of you were probably some of the best known people in law enforcement that weren't law enforcement. And it was, and then now you've moved on and you're police captain now and all. But one of the things I remember the most about us running around in Washington, D.C. was your 5K run, the Officer Down Memorial 5K run. Why don't you talk about that and who did that benefit and how did that all come together?
Sure. So it's a lot of people call it the ODMP 5K, but it's actually the National Police Week 5K formally. And so I will be upfront. That was not my brainchild. We actually inherited that event from an FBI agent who had started it, and through his own busy life was unable to keep it going, and reached out to us to see if we wanted to collaborate and eventually take it over. And so we actually took it over probably in year 3 or 4 of him operating this, and we very quickly realized that it was around the same time where the ODMP was going through a transition of all volunteer to actually having a staff. And so as part of that, of course, you need funding. And so when we took over the National Police Week 5K, we turned it into sort of a hybrid. There were 2 benefactors from the funds of it. It was us, and it was also Concerns of Police Survivors, which is another absolutely amazing organization and one close to my heart, and I know close to all of your hearts here. And I coincidentally, the creation of COPS was also as a result of Officer Claggett and Officer Swartz murder in Prince George's County as well. So, so the National Police Week 5K, it's coming up on 20-year anniversary of that, I would imagine. And we, at the time, we would take over downtown DC during Police Week, and it would start and end right at the National Memorial, shut down the streets. It would run right by the U.S. Capitol, and it would start and end again right literally at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which had a super significant meaning to everyone in attendance.
Can everybody?
It grew from when we took it over. There were just a few hundred people who ran it to, I think the highest we had was right before COVID, was about 3,000 participants from around the country and around the world would run that event. And so we took the opportunity to create a virtual event so people in other countries could run it in conjunction with the actual event. And just last year, we started we call it the halfway to the 5K event, which is actually at the 6-month mark. So, and it's only half of a 5K, and it's a completely virtual event. So we're trying to keep the momentum going throughout the year with this, and the ultimate goal, again, it's a fundraising event for us so we can pay our staff, and it's also an event to bring awareness and allow the community and officers to run in memory of the fallen officers.
So, Chris, how can people find out more about that?
So you can go to the ODMP website, odmp.org, or you can also go to the National Police Week 5K website, which is nationalpoliceweek5k.org.
So talk about the evolution of ODMP. How many staff? Where are you headquartered? What's going on these days? What's next?
So the evolution, it started in my dorm room on the 8th floor of Eagle Hall in Harrisonburg, Virginia, running off of a school web server. So that the very first version of it was jmu.edu/ODMP or something like that. And today we are, the headquarters is in Fairfax, Virginia. It's near our historic courthouse in the county. There's a staff of 6 people in the office, and then we have some remote software developers who help us as well. And so, it's a full-time operation. And it's almost a 24/7 operation, as far as the line of duty death notifications, whether that happens on a weekend, a holiday, at night, as soon as we know about it, someone jumps on it to get that notification sent out.
Wow.
Chris, on that point, I have I guess I signed up years ago when I first met you, and I don't even remember how I signed up. But all I know is every time there is, God forbid, another officer death, on duty death. And also, I noticed you mentioned people who are about to get on parole. Okay. That you highlight, hey, so and so was convicted, blah, blah, blah. And they're a year or so away from getting out on parole. Okay. How could our listeners, our viewers, get, if they're not already getting the your your alerts, how can they get that? And tell us a little bit more about the parole part. How did that become part of your service?
Sure. So to get the alerts, you go to odmp.org, and or just Google ODMP. It'll be the first result, and there's an option to subscribe to email notifications. You can do it by creating an ODMP account, or you can just subscribe with your email address. You can also, if you Google or if you go to either the iTunes Store or Google Play Store, you can just search ODMP and download the mobile app. And we do notifications through the mobile app as well. What was the second part of your question?
I started seeing notices about people who are about to be,
no parole for cop killers. So that's one of the programs. Just memorializing officers wasn't enough for us, and so we wanted to make sure that justice was done also, because one of the most infuriating things for me, and in fact, the reason I started ODMP was because a cop killer was being released, right? And it frankly pissed me off. So one of the things that the organization did was to create a program to empower people within the community, law enforcement, citizens alike, to be notified when a cop killer was coming up for parole, and they could in turn send a letter to the parole board, basically encouraging them to not grant parole to the inmate. So it's been a very successful program. We've had hundreds of, over the course of the program's life, hundreds of potential paroles coming up, and the vast majority have been denied. We have heard back feedback from family members, survivors of the officer victims, who said that the letters certainly helped and really were, tipped the scale to ensure that they were kept locked up.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously honoring the fallen officers was the main mission, but I really enjoyed, I shouldn't say enjoyed, I guess I was happy to get those alerts that somebody is paying attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody's watching this and not just letting these guys go free. I mean, I guess probably on this call, all of us would probably like to see no parole for anybody who kills a cop. Unfortunately, that's not how the entire United States thinks, but
yeah,
we keep trying, and you're leading the charge. So good for you. Bill and Craig, other questions for Chris? This has been very informative. I thought I knew a little bit about ODMP, but I didn't know as much as I should have known. I appreciate you coming on today.
And one last thing I had, Chris, is even before the internet has expanded, I mean, now we have AI, so you can ask questions all the time. And was there a cop killed today? Whatever. And you get the answer immediately, and you might even see a photograph. But you guys started doing that in 1996 forward. I'm just amazed at how your volunteer network must be massive. I mean, you must have been getting alerts from people all over the country saying, hey, we just had a cop killed in my city today, and here's the information. I mean, how many volunteers have you relied on at ODMP over the years?
Oh, countless. Many of them have become close friends. Many of them are people who just occasionally will send something. Especially early on, we relied heavily on exactly what you described, which was someone in, some little town in the Midwest where an officer was killed in that town or the next town over, and they heard about it on their local news, and they contact us to let us know, right? Whereas through normal channels, something that happened in Kansas would never make it to Virginia without these volunteers. And so we would get that information. We would go and source it. We would call agencies. We would use, local news websites or whatever we had to do to verify the details.
More volunteers.
And we would, create the memorials after that.
It's interesting that, and you alluded to it earlier, that most of the time when a cop is killed in America, it doesn't get a lot of national attention, if at all. I know when I open up the Washington Post every morning, I would expect to see at least a blurb, if not a whole article, about an officer who might have been killed in the line of duty at some other part of the country. But that's not really the case. And as you point out, unless you have people in that part of the country, in that community where that officer died, most of us in the rest of the country aren't going to know about it. But thanks to ODMP, we did learn about those deaths quickly. And ultimately, their names did go on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial so that they're remembered forever. We will never forget the law enforcement heroes who have given their life for this country at the memorial, at ODMP. And hopefully, as you pointed out, because there are more memorials all over the country now in states and localities, these officers are getting their due honor and their due remembrance. So I hope that continues. But let me conclude my comments today by saying I'm very proud of you. I couldn't be more pleased with the work you've done over many, many years to honor the fallen law enforcement heroes of our country. And I'm proud to be a partner of yours and a friend. So thank you, sir. And thank you for coming on our show today. This has been, I know our audience knows you, knows ODMP, but now they know the whole story.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and it's an honor. It's great to reconnect and with all of you, and to be able to tell the story. And it's just 45 minutes or an hour is not enough. It doesn't do it justice. But I'll leave with this. Bill asked about the evolution of ODMP. From '96 until today, we've gone through several iterations of website design and the infrastructure. It was supposed to launch this summer. We got a little bit delayed, but hopefully within the next 2 weeks, fingers crossed, we will have a completely new ODMP experience, a complete redesign again that will really empower our visitors to go in depth into the stories and to find data and to do analysis into line of duty deaths, trends, patterns, and more information about it. So keep your eyes out for that. That should hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next two or 3 weeks be out.
And you mentioned earlier that you are a charitable organization. I assume you're a registered 501c3. Is that?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Tell the listeners, the viewers, how can they get involved? Because obviously you have a staff, you have a mission, and it needs funding. And part of that funding comes from the public, right?
Yeah, it does. Visiting our website, there's ways to volunteer. There's ways to participate in our events, the National Police Week 5K. We have a motorcycle ride called the Officer Down Memorial Ride. And you can also donate through there. It's a tax deductible donation in all 50 states. And there you can donate right online. And then we also have the ODMP store, which is ODMP branded merchandise that has memorializes fallen officers and also supports the organization through the proceeds of the sales.
That's great. How can we thank you? I mean, you have created a digital monument, actually, a digital monument that will forever declare that honor is not optional. Forgetting is not acceptable. And it's the core of your culture. It's the core of our culture at Citizens Behind the Badge. It's so nice to talk to someone of a like mind. And obviously you and Craig have worked together for years for the same mission, to never forget the people who have made the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. Chris, thanks for being on Heroes Behind the Badge. You've got a great story. Remind them, our listeners once again, and our viewers, what is your website, please?
You go to odmp.org, so it stands for Officer Down Memorial Page, or search for ODMP in iTunes or Google Play Store.
Great. And
Great job, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great job.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to remind our viewers and our listeners, this is Heroes Behind the Badge. Today's hero was Chris Cosgriff. And if you didn't hear the whole podcast, go back and start over. It's a great story. It's a great story. Remember, this podcast, Heroes Behind the Badge, is brought to you by citizensbehindthebadge.org. Citizens Behind the Badge is the leading voice of the American people in support of the men and women of law enforcement. Subscribe, like, follow. You'll be first in line when the next episode comes out. Okay? Again, Chris, thanks again. We appreciate you. We appreciate your story. That'll do it for this episode of Heroes Behind the Badge.